Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of 6 Degrees of Associations. With me today is Amy Thomasson with Cure SMA. Hi Amy.
Hi, Lucas. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Why don't we kick it off and tell us a little bit more about yourself and where you are currently?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, I am currently the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for Cure SMA. Cure SMA is a nonprofit organization that serves folks with a rare disease called spinal muscular atrophy. It's a neurodegenerative disorder that people are born with at birth, and it affects their muscles, so the ability to eat, breathe, walk, stand, all those sorts of things. And so we're really interspersed in the spinal muscular atrophy community and the rare disease community and disability community at large. And before Cure SMA, I was have been in the nonprofit space for about the past 10 years in nonprofits and associations, pivoting from a career in for-profits, working for a Fortune 500 before I came over to the association world. And I've worked in marketing, communications, membership, chapters, volunteer management, which is one of the things I love about association work. You just kind of roll up your sleeves and seize opportunities as they come.
I love that you've taken the opportunity to sort of segment yourself in different areas of the association, from membership to marketing, volunteer work, which is, as you said, really, really important and also really fulfilling. Tell us a little bit about that transition from corporate America, we'll call it, to association America.
Sure. So I was working in marketing for security products at that time. So for commercial installations, think your cameras, your cloud-based security, those sorts of things. And while I enjoyed the work, what we were doing as far as the products and things like that weren't really my passion. And then I was looking to make a pivot because the company I was working for got bought out, and they were looking for folks to move. I had just bought a home in the Chicago suburbs, and so I really wasn't looking to move. And I thought this is a perfect time to rethink my career at this point. So what I started to do was just have a lot of meetings and coffee chats with people across different industries, almost kind of like I was going on a tour of discovery for myself and my own career. And I ended up having coffee with a friend who was in the association space. He had volunteered with ASAE, Association Forum, and also worked in associations since his 9 to 5. And we just started chatting. I really didn't have much familiarity with associations. I was familiar maybe with trade associations, but certainly not with a membership-based model of associations. And we got to talking. He said, I was just trying to meet you, but I think you could really help solve some problems for us or help us tackle some challenges at my current organization. Let me recommend that you meet my boss. And things just kind of went from there. And I had the benefit of learning and working in associations, but also working with someone who could really mentor me through the industry as well.
I'll say I have the pleasure of working in the DC area, because if you go down to Washington, DC, or especially if you go down to Old Town Alexandria, you could stumble and probably fall into 3 of them, without trying. And so they're everywhere. But Chicago in your area is also kind of a hub for associations. So it's not too unfamiliar that you would run into somebody from associations there. And we're actively, reaching that market ourselves. And it's exciting to be there, especially in some of the industries that you've worked with. So what kept you there? You found this new arena in the association industry, and sometimes you can go in there and say, this isn't for me, but clearly you've been working there in the industry, 8 years?
Yes.
So what's the draw? What's been the hook for you?
I think it's mission-based work where I'm somebody who wants to feel like I don't just have a job, I have a career. And it's important that what I do also lines up with my value system as a person. And so I want to know that when I'm away from my family, when I'm making those sacrifices, it's because I can show my son, who's 5, that I'm doing something that matters. And my son has had the benefit of coming to Cure SMA's conference, which is typically at either Disney World or Disneyland.
Well, that sounds tough for him.
Yes, right. And getting to see why mom's out of the house, what I'm doing, why I'm sometimes spending long hours doing what I'm doing. And I pivoted specifically over to Cure SMA because now I'm working directly with affected individuals. I've been in the healthcare space for a while, working on the clinician side at associations that were doing education for clinicians in different healthcare verticals. But now I get to work directly with the patients themselves, with affected individuals, with families. And as somebody who was born with some of my own health challenges, and my son who was also born with a birth defect, it resonates with me on a really personal level as well.
Yeah. So we got to talk briefly. I got to hear a little bit of that story, but if you're open to it, I'd love to kind of dive in and lean in on that story a little bit, because I think it's a really great story, not only because where you are today, but specifically some of the roles. So would you mind sharing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I was born with a severe cleft palate. So I was missing most of my soft palate. My parents were, and there were thoughts that I had potentially other health issues as well that turned out not to be true. Or not to come to fruition for me. There might have been some divine intervention there, but my family was told I would probably never speak normally. They were also told that I would likely be deaf by age 2. And so I give a lot of credit to my mom, who just really thought, like, I'm going to pour language into my child because this might be as much as she gets. You know, toddler years might be it for her, is what she's going to hear as language. And so it's interesting because I really took that as a challenge. You know, at first I was a really shy kid because I was pretty self-conscious about my speaking ability to form sounds. Some of them were a little bit more indecipherable, and did a lot of really intensive speech therapy for about half of my childhood. And then I just decided to take that challenge as an opportunity. And now I'm in a career where I do some public speaking for a living, not only as a representative of the organization that I work for, but I have probably done about 50 different speaking engagements, I would say, over the past 5 years or so, from conferences to I got to do a television news segment last year, a handful of podcasts. So I really am somebody who likes to prove people wrong. So if you give me a challenge, I'm going to find a way to hopefully rise to that occasion.
I love that. I mean, I have the pleasure of interviewing a lot of folks, and in my role within my organizations, I get to meet a lot of executives that have great stories. And honestly, Amy, that's one of the best stories I've ever heard. And just knowing that you're in your role, you've spent a career in marketing and communicating from a place where ultimately you had some doubts on whether that communication was even going to be, part of your life. Mm-hmm. And so I think that story of triumph is amazing. A lot of people should hear it. So I'm grateful that we get to share that here. And I'm love that like fire and resilience that you have. Like that's what it takes to kind of excel, I think, in life and career and all of that. What about some of the other challenges, I would say, that you've sort of overcome outside of that in your career? Like what are those roadblocks that you've hit where you thought, wow, this is something I really need to overcome. This is a big challenge. This could potentially be, a really big issue for me personally or for my organization. And maybe you didn't make the right decision, but you learned.
Mm-hmm. I think there are a few things. One, I think a lot of women, unfortunately, in the workplace and just in general, a lot of us face imposter syndrome, and I'm sure a lot of men do too. But I hear about it a lot from my network of other female leaders too. And I think trusting myself that I belong, that I have a seat at the table, that I'm there for a reason, and that was difficult for me early in my career, especially in the for-profit space. I worked in industrial and electrical manufacturing and distribution. I was typically one of only a handful of women who was ever in a room. One of the first women who had an office, one of the first women who was a manager. And so there was commentary about that sometimes. And then there was also an inner dialogue as well. So I think learning to have that confidence and
Hmm.
self-belief has been something, that's a daily challenge that I overcome. Each time I'm in a new situation, I wonder, should I be there? And so it's just kind of trying to reframe some of those self-beliefs. And that's one. I think sometimes too, thinking about where am I investing my time?
Hmm.
I'm somebody who likes to take on a lot of things and sometimes maybe doesn't always raise my hand to say, hey, I need help.
Sure. No, I think we all do that sometimes. That whether it's a control issue, you just want to impart the right, or you just want to be involved because you know that you have the ability or the capacity to add value to a specific situation or a project. Sometimes it's really powerful to just say no, and keep really, really focused on what it is. And so I appreciate also the understanding of what do you do with your time, because it's the most valuable resource we have. It's the most limited. You can't buy any, right? So in your current role, where do you spend your time? Where is the most effective means or use of Amy's time?
Sure. So my team and I have talked a lot about this, and I have just the thoughts around. I'll take a step back to and talk about the thoughts around marketing in general. In the for-profit space, I used to always say about marketing teams, I want us to be a revenue generator and not a cost center for the organization. And so
Hmm.
I've kind of flipped that to be able to work for the association nonprofit world. So I want us to what we're doing to be creating member value, to be helping bring in, at my current organization, we're fundraising based and not membership based. So to be bringing in fundraising dollars to do things that are moving our mission forward.
Yeah. And how do you balance sort of mission-based direct communication? And we're just kind of free falling here, or brand, right? There's been a heavy emphasis in the past couple of decades, the Apple thing. It's like, no, we're not going to try to sell people our product. We're just going to talk about who we are and our brand, and people will become attracted to that. Like, how do you balance those?
I'm somebody who wants to see more ROI from what we're doing. And I see this in like the sponsorship space too, and where
Yeah.
you're working with industry partners who themselves aren't nonprofits. The ambiguity around brand awareness and to say, hey, we're engaging in something to create brand awareness. A lot of companies just aren't interested in that anymore. It needs to be measurable. They need to know who they're talking to, what audiences are they connecting with, what are the expectations on what will be achieved. So we certainly look at awareness, and awareness is an important component at Cure SMA in particular because we're a rare disease community.
Right.
Most folks have not heard of spinal muscular atrophy unless they have been put in the position where somebody they love is directly impacted by SMA. So awareness is important, but awareness linked with what? Awareness in and of itself, in my opinion, is not a goal. So what are we doing in addition to awareness to move the needle for people, in this instance, people with SMA?
Do you think that sort of mantra mentality around ROI, do you think that's sort of your for-profit roots, or is that just something that you think fits everywhere?
I think it's a little bit of my for-profit roots and how I've kind of positioned myself as my elevator pitch in the association space, like what differentiates me from it, for instance, if I was up for a job with another candidate.
Hmm.
And I think some of that for-profit experience has helped. I think also because I came into the association space and didn't just stay in the marketing area. I've also done individual and corporate membership too, where ROI is a very important component, particularly around corporate or company membership.
Yeah. Do you keep coming back to marketing? Is that fair? Like
Yes.
that's where your heart is, marketing, communication.
My heart is in storytelling. So typically that comes from a marketing communications department, but it comes from all other areas of an association or nonprofit are meeting these unique, interesting individuals with such great stories. But I view that as my greatest privilege is to share the stories in the instance where I work now of people with spinal muscular atrophy. If you're trusting me with your story, I really view that as something very important. So I just want to get out there and tell more stories. But I would say my areas of passion within association nonprofit work are marketing, business development, and fundraising.
And I'm always curious because everything's moving so quickly, changing so rapidly. If you wind the clock back, let's say even 10 years, what are you doing differently in marketing today than you were 10 years ago? And that's actually a long time. I almost said 5 years.
Everything.
Yeah. I should have said 5 years.
Sometimes I wish, I had graduated from college a few years later to be part of a lot of the movements around digital marketing. I think that's one of the biggest changes. It's just the movement from your classic awareness and advertising based model of marketing into something that's really focused on audiences. For instance, I'll give you an example. Cure SMA moved into a new email platform that's connected with Salesforce a year ago. Before that, we were really segmenting just based on demographics. Now we're really looking at behavioral based segmentation. How do you interact with us? And what do we want to communicate with you? And where do we want to drive you to or point you to based on those interactions? So I think that's a big change in marketing. I think there are so many different things on the horizon. I just read something the other day that said, with AI, marketing will be one of the segments or industries that changes the most over the next few years. So trying to get my head wrapped around some of those implications too.
I would probably agree with that, although I think it's going to stretch almost every aspect of the organization in some capacity. There will always be the need for new creative and thought, and there's always going to be outlier situations. And at the risk of aging our interview here for future listeners 2 years from now, how are you looking at AI within Cure SMA, for example, and implementing some of that? Like, what are some of the things that you're at this point just trying to wrap your head around?
I'm thinking about ways to use AI. And again, we really haven't gotten into this yet, other than learning at Cure SMA at this point. But how can we use AI to be more efficient with time of staff? I think there are certain things, maybe I'm old school here, but I think there are certain things that AI will never replace, that direct, authentic connection between people. But, there are some opportunities, I think, for particularly taking communications and segmenting them, those sorts of things that I think AI could be looked at as being, again, you talked about time as our most precious resource. How can we use AI to help us use our time more effectively?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within our organization, we're going through that and sort of whiteboarding out, I'll say at this point, we haven't even really contracted with anybody yet, but looking at what are those tasks day to day that each staff member is doing that isn't necessarily below them. I don't like that term, but isn't the best use of their time individually. And we sort of come to this conclusion. There's 15 to 20% of each individual person's day that could be automated, made more efficient through the use of AI. And so we're going position by position actually to evaluate what is it, and looking at from a sponsorship, right? We help organizations sell sponsorship, for example. Through that, there's an aspect of that that's just setting up meetings. Like, we hire high caliber individuals that are really effective in meetings. They have 7 to 10 years of association experience. Do we need them sending cold emails or making cold outreach calls and setting appointments? Probably not, right? Could the bot set the appointments and have communications via email that go back into our Salesforce, and until it gets to Mike's or Tony's or Grace's calendar, and then they can go and have that human interaction, as you said. I'm excited. I'm curious. I'm a little bit nervous.
Right now is kind of my word. I know very little, self-admittedly, and I want to learn a lot more.
Yeah. I have lots of questions and maybe a little anxiety, but that's for another conversation, another day. What about we're almost halfway through this year, but in the remainder of the year, what's something that you're really excited about or you're really looking forward to?
So, work-wise, the Cure SMA annual conference is in just over a month here, and it really is.
Right.
I may be biased, but I have seen no other event like our conference. It's more than 3,000 people, which
Wow.
is a good portion there are about 5,000 people in the US who have spinal muscular atrophy. So it's a significant portion of the total population. It's at Disney, and it's just, everything is so thoughtfully considered. I'm really impressed with the team, particularly that puts together the conference. I play a small role in that, but we have a much larger team who really does the heavy lifting on our conference. Everything from games that are appropriate to children who are experiencing all different stages of SMA, which can range from you're sitting, standing, walking, to you're in a wheelchair, to you're fully reclined, and everything in between. Everyone's SMA experience is very unique, but
Wow.
it's such a special and welcoming environment at our conference that I'm really excited to have the privilege to do that for the second year in a row. Personally, I'm excited about the fact that there are a lot more in-person events. We're getting out there again a little bit. I did a lot of virtual speaking engagements throughout COVID, but nothing replaces just getting out and connecting with your community in
Agreed.
person.
So what about if you push that ball out 2 years? Do you have some larger outlook projects that you're working on that you're getting excited about?
Yes. So I'm really excited about the team that I'm privileged to manage. I've seen so much personal and professional growth in them in the 15 months that I've had the privilege to help lead this team. We're growing the team, adding individuals. And one of my greatest areas of passion is particularly around mentoring, leadership, guidance, assistance I can provide, especially for young women in the association space. So I'm excited to see that continue in my team. I'm also just excited to learn and grow more for myself. My friend Jackie has what she calls her kitchen cabinet of advisors, and I'm looking to really kind of build that out with new folks, especially as I've gone from more of a membership-based association to a more of a fundraising-based environment, to building out that network and learning from those folks.
I mentioned before the show that I heard you on another podcast talking about, once you found association, speaking of young folks and young women specifically, like you would love to tell more young folks about associations and kind of get the word out. And I'd love to hear like your thoughts on how could we do that, right? I work in other industries that are trying to get, young folks into trades, for example. And how do we reach these younger folks?
I think that's tough, and I wish I had a succinct answer for you, but I can. One thing I've been talking about with folks is like, even at the college environment, and maybe even in the college environment, it's too late. I had no idea what associations were. And so I think finding more opportunities to connect with young people, even on the volunteer side, so they could experience the benefits of being part of an association, which I think can then maybe lead them into a career path, because that's how I truly grew to love association work. It wasn't just where I was working. It was that I was introduced to this much larger network who was so helpful to me in rounding out my experience at my first association job, with everything from being part of a women's network of women who are kind of at my same career stage where we can chat with each other, to senior leaders, to having a direct one-to-one formal mentoring relationship. And so I think, how can we find those opportunities for young people to start with volunteering and then hopefully grow to love association work? If we look at the trends with Gen Z folks too, and you see a lot of them are saying paycheck matters less than feeling like I am doing something important with my life. And so what better career path than association and nonprofits for that?
There is a ton of value and fulfillment, and ultimately what you had mentioned, bringing you in that mission-based work. I agree. Like where else can you impact and have so much say and so much power in terms of changing, right? It's a small business, we say, usually a smaller staff, but you're reaching a larger industry, which are all of these businesses, which do have an impact like on the economy, on the country, ultimately on the world. That messaging, however we get it out, Amy, if we have to partner on, I'm in for it. But getting that message out to the younger generations, maybe starting with our own children. Yours is watching you at Cure SMA and getting to go to that event. Mine have watched me as well going into it and been curious about it, but still sometimes have trouble telling folks what Daddy does because, what is an association? They don't know if they figured that out yet. Shame on me. Maybe I need to do a better job of communicating.
I'm hopeful. My son, I got him 3 piggy banks, and it was spend, save, donate, because we're trying to build that. Okay, well, and donations go where? And so, a few months ago, he handed me his piggy bank that probably had about 75 cents in it and says, "This is I want this to go to the people with SMA."
Oh, wow. Amazing. Mission accomplished, Amy.
Right?
You did it. We have something similar. Yep. Spend, save, and give. And they can do whatever they want with their spend, of course. The savings, we know where that goes. But the spend, it has to be something service-based, an organization. And they find some really creative things and ways to do that. And I'll have to introduce them to Cure SMA, and they'll watch our episode here, and maybe they'll open their piggy banks as well. That's awesome.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I usually bring us in and land the plane here by asking you, is there somebody that you could recommend that our audience would benefit from hearing from? So I'd love to hear who's on your mind.
Sure. So I talked a little bit about my introduction to associations, and the individual that I had coffee with, who was a friend of a friend, who just introduced me to this world, and his name is Bert Blanchard. I'm sure some of your listeners, especially those in the Chicagoland area, will recognize Bert's name, but he has just been such a mentor to me and just a joy to know as a friend. So would definitely recommend Bert.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I love it when it's somebody that I don't know in the association industry. And so I don't know Bert, and I'm looking forward to meeting him. And even if folks know the name, I'm sure he's got some amazing stories, much like yours, Amy. This has been an absolute pleasure. Again, grateful that I was able to share some of your story, and I know our listeners benefited from hearing sort of your path and journey in associations and learning stuff from you. And whether you know that you're mentoring the audience or not, I think you are. And I think that's great.
Well, thank you so much. It's such a privilege. And if anyone would like to connect afterwards, you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. Always looking to connect with folks in the association world.
Excellent. Well, we'll push that out and share your LinkedIn with our audience when this is live and ready to go. And thank you again, Amy, for joining us.
Thank you, Lucas. I appreciate it.